Welcome back to the Snowpoint Cast. Today we're going to be talking about a deck from 2006. The deck's called Arcanine. It got 2 top 16 results at Worlds in 2006, so it's definitely a very strong, really aggressive deck. But let's get right into it. So deck starts off with 4 Growlithe. Growlithe has 50 HP, a single retreat, and a weakness to water. So Growlithe actually has one really good attack. Body Slam is really nice. So for a single colorless energy, it does 10. And flip a coin. If heads, the defending Pokemon is now paralyzed. Paralyzed attacks on a basic Pokemon are some of the best attacks that you can have on a basic, because it lets you stall out that turn before you get an evolution, which is really nice. And also, like, paralyze is the best status condition in the game. So if you're going to do anything to your opponent, I mean, poison is cool and burn is cool, but paralyze means they pretty much can't do anything for their whole turn unless they have a switch in their hand. So definitely the best status condition and a really solid attack on a basic. It's got another attack, Fire Breathing. So for a fire colorless, it does 10. Flip a coin. If heads, you do 20 more damage. So I guess it's okay. But Body Slam is definitely the good attack on that card. But you play Growlithe so you can play Arcanine EX. Arcanine is a super cool EX. It's got 120 HP, 2 retreat, still weak to water, and all 3 parts of this card are really good. So starting off with the Poke Body, Fire Remedy. Whenever you attach a fire energy from your hand to Arcanine, you heal a damage counter and a special condition. And all special conditions. So that's great for stuff like Queendom, right? Like if Queendom hits you with a Toxic, 2 retreats pretty fat, so you're not really getting out of the active that frequently, and you don't play many switch cards either, so Toxic can be really bad for you. But if a Nidoqueen Toxics you, you can just attach a fire from your hand, and then you heal 10 of the 20 damage that was done from poison, and the poison's gone. So essentially it's a wasted turn for Nidoqueen, and Toxic is a really good asset that they have. So for them to not be able to Toxic is a really, really strong part of this deck. And also Flaridos is another powerful deck in the format that hits you for special conditions. So Flareon EX, when you evolve it, your opponent's active is burned and confused, so being able to get rid of that with a fire energy is really nice. And then Ariados, also Spider Trap, brings you up and then makes you asleep and poisoned. So being able to get rid of all those conditions is really, really nice depending on what deck you're playing against. And being able to manipulate your numbers is good too. Like sometimes that 1 damage is the difference between you being knocked out and you living. So being able to manipulate your healing like that is cool too. The first attack that Arcanine EX has is Overrun. Overrun's a really powerful attack. So it does 30 for a fire and a colorless, and then it snipes 20 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So that's pretty decent spread for this day and age. I mean, there's a lot of better cards that do, you know, nowadays that do that for a single energy, or better for a single energy. But back in the day, being able to go 30-20 for 2 is definitely very valuable. And it's really good for just manipulating your opponent's board, right? Like, you're able to drop 20s on your opponent's bench, and then you play Cursed Stone, which is a stadium that we're going to go over in a sec. And Cursed Stone drops a damage counter on every Pokemon with powers. So you're able to just like really easily choose where you want to drop damage on your opponent's board. And then later in the game, when you start to hit like reversal heads, it just lets you clear whatever you want on your opponent's board. So a really solid spread. Flame Swirl, Overrun has a lot of synergy with Flame Swirl too, because even the EXs in this format, if you have a stage 2 EX, it's got 150 HP. That's the max HP a stage 2 EX has. So if you're Flame Swirling for 100, and then you Overrun for 30-20, if you hit him with a single 20 Overrun, and then you're able to get him in the active, and then you hit him for a 30, then you can Flame Swirl for the knockout. So that's really cool on stuff like Blastoise. You're able to hit it with an Overrun twice on the bench, and then with a Cursed Stone and a Flame Swirl, you can knock it out with reversal heads. So Flame Swirl is really good. You discard 2 energy or 1 react attached to Arcanine, and you play 4 react just so you can have that single energy discard. But yeah, solid, all around like a really, really solid card. You play 4 Jirachi as well. Jirachi's good for a couple reasons in this deck. It's got 60 HP, single retreat, resistance to grass, and a weakness to fire. But you play it for Wishing Star. So Wishing Star is its power. When Jirachi's in your active position, you can make Jirachi asleep. And then you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, pick one of them, and put them in your hand. So that's really important, because in this deck, what you need to do is you need to hit a combination of cards that lets you hit Arcanine EX on your turn 2. The really powerful part about this deck is how aggressive it is. So if you're able to get that Overrun off turn 2, it's just that much more likely that you're able to win a game, and Jirachi helps a lot with that. So Wishing Star is great. Often you just need to find an energy turn 1, and then an Arcanine EX and an energy turn 2. You play a card called Swoop that kind of lets you get around benching a Growlithe. You don't have to find that turn 1, but it is definitely a nice part of Wishing Star. If you can find a Growlithe, that's good. And yeah, it just like keeps you consistent. You play 4 because it's a very consistent card. You play 2 Lunatone as well. So Lunatone's got 60 HP, a single retreat, and a weakness to Psychic. It's got a body called Soul Shade. If you have Lunatone in play, your opponents can't use any powers on their fire Pokemon that aren't EX. So solid body, shuts off Macargo, and the Solrock shuts off Pidgeot too, so they're just like kind of a consistency block. You have the bench room for Solrock in this deck, so why not play it? Moon Guidance is a decent attack as well. So for colorless, search your deck for a trainer card, excluding supporter cards, show it to your opponent and put it in your hand. So that's good for stuff like finding a Holon Transceiver turn 1 if you don't have a supporter. You can just do that, find a Transceiver, and then all of a sudden you have a Mentor turn 2. Being able to find a Swoop teleporter, which we're going to go over in a second, is really important as well, because sometimes you can't afford to have that Lunatone in the active and you need to hit your Arcanine. So getting a Swoop with it can be good as well. You play a Solrock as well. Solrock's got 70 HP, a single retreat, and a weakness to grass. So like I was saying, Luna Shade shuts off Pidgeot if you have the combo of them on your bench, and you play the 2-1 because Lunatone has the better attack, but you still want to have prizing consistency. You don't want to just like have one of them prized. You have to force the Solrock prize to not be able to get the Lunatone Solrock combo off. It's got a decent attack too. Call for family for 1. Search your deck for a Lunatone, put it on your bench. I mean, if you start it and you're versus a deck that really relies on Macargo and Pidgeot, being able to just search that Lunatone is definitely super decent. Okay, so getting into the stadiums, you play 4 Cursed Stone. So Cursed Stone is a really important part of this deck, not only because dropping additional damage lets you do those tricky turns like with Blastoise and stuff, but also because Stadium Wars are really important in this format. Oftentimes you need to be able to play 4 stadiums in a game because a lot of other decks play 4 stadiums as well. So if you want it to stick, you have to play the 4th one and have it last. So Cursed Stone's really good. It just buffs your power, and over time with Overrun, your spread can get like really, really out of hand on your opponent's board, especially if they have a lot of Pokemon with powers. And a lot of the decks in this format have a ton of Pokemon with powers. So yeah, Cursed Stone's really great. Play 4 Holon Transceiver as well. Holon Transceiver lets you search for a Holon supporter card, put it in your hand, and it's just a trainer, keeps you really consistent. You play a Holon Engine in this deck, so I mean most Holon Engine decks play 4 Transceiver. It's pretty staple in Holon Engine decks. Let's play 4 Swoop Teleporter. So that's a really interesting card about this deck. I'm going to talk about Swoop for a second because there's a lot of stuff that you can do with Swoop. And there's a couple different reasons that you play it. So the first of which is so that you're consistent with your Arcanines, right? So let's say you started Jirachi and you have an energy and nothing else, and you're like, well, I kind of need to draw something before you have an Arcanine, but you don't really have anything else. So you Wishing Star, okay, you find a Swoop, and then if you have an Arcanine and an energy, next turn Swoop lets you go, I'm going to discard this Jirachi. So you pick one of your Pokemon to play and you discard it, and then you search your deck for a basic Pokemon and replace it with that. So it keeps all the damage counters, everything else on it. But Swoop just lets you switch into that Growlithe, and then if you have an Arcanine and an energy on your turn 2, you're overrunning. So really, it just lets you be really consistent. Another nice part about Swoop Teleporter is Cursed Stone hits for Poke Powers, and you play Jirachis, right? So you need them in the early game, but later in the game, you really don't want them on your bench because they're actually just a liability. So being able to Swoop Teleporter and get a Pokemon with a Poke Body or another Growlithe just to get that free prize out of there is definitely really nice as well. So Pokemon or Swoop Teleporter rather is a really it just lets you be consistent with the deck. Hey, you play 4 Pokemon reversals as well. So Pokemon reversal, flip a coin of heads, choose one of your opponent's bench Pokemon and switch it with the defending Pokemon. So really solid again with Overrun, like you're sniping damage wherever you want. So being able to manipulate your opponent's board even more by bringing up stuff that you've sniped a couple times and now you have enough energy to kill with Flame Swirl just lets you keep pace. This deck is really good at keeping pace because you start really aggressively. Like, okay, so most basics in this format have 50 or 60 HP. So with Arcanine EX, something cool that you can do is you can go like, okay, so say my opponent has 2 50 HP Pokemon on the board, and I have an Arcanine. I'm going to go 30-20, hit the other 50, okay, and they missed evolutions for them. So pretty mediocre draws for them, but whatever. I had a reversal heads. Now all of a sudden I'm getting a double knockout on basic Pokemon. So that's not only detrimental to your opponent's board, like it's really bad for your board if you get 2 of your basic Pokemon knocked out, but also I'm taking 2 prizes off that. So it's it can be really out of hand if you hit a fast Arcanine and you're hitting your reversal heads. You play Pokemon Retriever as well. Pokemon Retriever is good for stuff like recovering your Lunatones. Sometimes you need to get back an Arcanine line too. Like Arcanine's your only attacker and you only play a 4/4. So if you prize like half of the line, it can be definitely difficult to complete a game, and Retriever just keeps you consistent like that. Okay, so getting into the supporter cards, you're going to start off with 3 Professor Elm's training method. So Elm's training method just lets you find your Arcanine EXs, and it's just consistent like that. That's the only thing that the card does, but you really need to find your Arcanines on turn 2. If you, like I said, if you're not finding your Arcanine on turn 2, if you're not overrunning turn 2, you're not reaching the full potential that this deck is like purpose to reach. So yeah, Elm's training method keeps you really consistent. You also play 3 TV Reporter. So TV Reporter is really good for thinning, and you don't really play a ton of other like raw draw. So thinning is definitely decent. You want to get rid of those Jirachis once you don't need them. A lot of the times you don't need the second Lunatone. So yeah, just like decent draw. So you draw 3 cards and then you discard any 1 card in your hand. Just a decent supporter. You play 3 Rockets Admin as well. So admin is great. Both players shuffle their hand into their deck and then they draw up to their remaining prize cards. So early game, it's a good shuffle draw. You shuffle draw 6, which, you know, your odds to see Arcanine aren't amazing, but it's more than like a TV Reporter. So Rockets Admin is good draw early, and being able to hurt your opponent late game too. Something cool about Arcanine is you don't have to take prizes until you really want to. So you can set up your opponent's board. You can have like 1 Arcanine in the active with a fire and a colorless, and then another one on the bench that you're like loading up with a bunch of energy. And you can just be like overrunning and setting up knockouts, and you can let that Arcanine die, and then admin, they go down to 4, you still have 6, and then you start killing stuff. So they start losing their board, and you know, getting shuffled down to 4 is not that great. 4 cards is not a ton of cards. So admin lets you be even aggressive in the hand. Okay, so you play 2 Mentor as well. Holon Mentors, discard a card from your hand, search your deck for 3 basic Pokemon with 100 HP or less, and then put them in your hand. So that's great because it can find your Soul Tone combo, but also just like finds your Growlithe. Usually your turn 1 supporter is going to be a Mentor. It's the best turn 1 supporter in this format, pretty widely regarded. And yeah, just like really staple consistency supporter. Play an Adventurer as well. So Adventurer says discard a card from your hand. If you can't discard a card, you can't play this card. Draw 3 cards. If you discarded a Pokemon with Delta on its card, draw 4 instead. So you don't play a Delta Pokemon, so it's always just draw 3. But Transceiver lets you take these cards out of the discard. So sometimes, you know, in the late game when you don't have another supporter, but you do have a Transceiver, it lets you be consistent with Adventurer. Scientist is really good as well. It's another Holon supporter. Most decks that play like a Holon supporter line, they play like 2 Mentor, a Scientist, and an Adventure, and some play more, but that's usually pretty staple for Holon engines. So Holon Scientist says discard a card from your hand. All the Holon supporters say that before you can use it. If you have less cards in your hand than your opponent, draw cards until you have the same number of cards as your opponent. So a lot of decks in this format play a lot of draw, and your hand's often not as big as, like, let's say you're playing against like Meta Knight. Meta Knight is going to have a way bigger hand than you. So being able to match your opponent's hand size just lets you hit those cool like react combos or cursed stone combos that you need in a game. The bigger combos are what you play Scientist for. You play Scott as well. Scott says search your deck for up to 3 cards in any combination of supporter cards, stadium cards, show them to your opponent and put in your hand. So that finds your Cursed Stones. Cursed Stone is a really solid stadium, and just being able to find it is good. And being able to find your admins on the turn that you need it as well is good. And okay, so if you miss a Elm's training method turn 1, but you hit a Scott at least, or not turn 1, turn 2, unless you're going second, and you hit a Scott, you know, missing that overrun turn, bad. But sometimes you can't afford it because sometimes you just like don't hit the Arcanine. So being able to Scott and be like, well, I missed the Elm this turn, at least I'm able to hit it next turn. It just makes your deck a little bit more consistent. Okay, so getting to energy cards. You're going to be playing 10 fire and 4 react. So 10 fire, you know, 14 energy is a lot, but it's really important to get your turn 1 attach down. If you're missing your turn 1 attach, it means you're not getting a turn 2 overrun. So you always need to have that turn 1 attach and then the turn 2 attach as well. And 14 energy just makes you consistent, especially with Jirachi, like you're always finding energy. And again, the react energies, the only reason that you play those is so that you can flame swirl with Arcanine and discard 1 react. Being able to discard 1 to do 100 damage is like really, really effective in this format, especially if you're drawing well and you're hitting your react energies turn after turn. You just get a stream 100s. So yeah, this has been Arcanine from 2006. If you have any questions about the deck, feel free to leave them in the comments below and I'll do my best to get back to them. But yeah, thanks so much for tuning in.